Now let's begin with a keenly watched, much anticipated court case concerning free speech in Nigeria, which has come up today in the West African Court, better known as the ECOWAS Court or the Community Court of Justice. The court has begun hearing a lawsuit filed by a coalition of Nigerian civil rights groups against the ban on Twitter, which was imposed on the social media platform earlier this month by the Nigerian government. More than 400 organizations and individuals are behind the challenge. They say that the ban is an attempt to curb free speech. Many of these civil society organizations, of course, use Twitter and other social media platforms to promote their campaigns. Well, one of the complainants in that case against the Nigerian government over its ban on Twitter is the former presidential candidate and former Nigerian Minister of Education, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, who's also one of the conveners of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. And Dr. Ezekwesili joins me now from Abuja. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ezekwesili, for joining us. Just tell us more about the grounds on which you and the rest of your coalition are suing the Nigerian government over Twitter.
Well, it's a simple ground. It is that Twitter does represent a place where citizens are free to express their opinion. They are able to use it to hold government accountable. They are able to use it to associate. They use Twitter to do their daily businesses. And so to the extent that individual rights are guaranteed in the 1999 Constitution, to that extent, do we as citizens believe that any government that seeks to hamper those rights, to infringe on those rights, is not doing the right thing at all. And in a democracy, when you feel that your rights are being violated, you go to court. The good thing is that the ECOWAS court exists as a way of showing that we can have both regional and sub-regional mechanisms for access to justice. And so we're using it.
Well, what exactly, Dr. Ezekwesili, do you want the ECOWAS court to rule on? I mean, what sort of jurisdiction does the court have?
Well, Nigeria is a signatory to the treaty that brought ECOWAS into existence. And the ECOWAS court is an instrument of ECOWAS. And so to that extent, Nigeria also is a signatory to the African Charter on Human Rights. Article 9 of it guarantees the right of expression of citizens. And so there are many instruments that Nigeria has signed on to. And so it's well within our right to say that give us the judgment that government has infringed on our rights and should not be allowed to continue to do so. And so the basic thrust of the argument is that citizens' right must not be violated in any way at all, including in ways that say you have no right to social media, or in ways that say we are going to determine the extent of your freedom. There's nothing in the Constitution or in any of these treaties that our government signed onto that allows that.
Well, I completely understand the point you're making about the freedoms that are guaranteed in the Constitution and in the various treaties, but I'm curious as to why you're going to the ECOWAS court and not a Nigerian court. I mean, is there a sense that the government doesn't obey court orders made by Nigerian courts, that it doesn't respect their rulings?
Well, the truth is that the fact that we go to an ECOWAS court does not preclude the fact that there is also the Nigerian court within which those kinds of enforcements can be, judicial enforcements can happen, or judicial requests can happen. But I hope you do remember that courts were not even in session across the country for months. And then, when we look at the ECOWAS court, it basically gives us that sense that we are also using our sub-regional mechanisms as much as possible. If you looked around the continent now, you would find that there's this sense that social media is not welcome. And that's if there's a foreboding about it. Because it shows that our continent is refusing to upgrade the way that governance is operated. I mean, today's world is a world where social media, with all its warts and all, does represent a force for good for citizens of any country. And so this idea that we have to remain anachronistic in the way that we engage the public space is one that we shouldn't allow. And I think that Nigerians have always shown that they can be pioneers of ideas. So going to the ECOWAS court is an important part of that process of getting judicial precedents that would go beyond just the Nigerian citizen.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Ezekwesili, but isn't this an attempt on your part to attack issues or an issue of national sovereignty? Because the government argues that they are defending national security, and by you going to the ECOWAS court, a regional court, you are seeking to overturn the government's autonomy to act.
That is so wrong. The Nigerian government, I hope you know that our president only just recently returned from a meeting of the ECOWAS. Since when did, using instruments of ECOWAS become, an attempt at overturning national sovereignty? By virtue of our being members of ECOWAS, we're already considered to the fact that, the rules and the institutions that are creations of ECOWAS would bind on us. So there's no such thing. The second thing that when you talk about national sovereignty, you have to recognize that if the government felt that way, it wouldn't have also then gone to seek a counter, to put in a request for a preliminary objections to the suit, right? So it does recognize that, yes, this is a legitimate aspiration on the part or request on the part of the citizens. So there's no such thing. Please, that interpretation would be totally not correct, both in insinuation or even in reality. And then the third thing is that this matter of national sovereignty is important for us to almost always interrogate it. When you think of national sovereignty, you have to recognize that your citizens really represent the basis for sovereignty. The legitimacy of any government is conferred on it by the citizens. To the extent that a government then begins to act against the interest of those citizens, it is undermining the national sovereignty itself.
Right, but I mean, obviously, Dr. Ezekwesili, civil society groups like yours make great use. I mean, you, of course, as well as the civil society groups that you work with, make great use of Twitter to promote your causes. I mean, you, Aisha Yusufu, a lot of other people made great use of Twitter with the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, and of course the End SARS protests and all of that. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Twitter is just one service and just a company. I mean, how can you make the argument that it is a human or a universal right to access a service offered by a private company?
How can you possibly determine the extent to choice? You have probably about 5 million Nigerians who are on Twitter. They choose to be on Twitter. Nobody puts there's no compulsion to be. But once they've made that choice, you must respect that choice. Why should anybody negate the choice of service for information, for interaction, for learning, for all kinds of business-related activities, for jobs that enormously created by virtue of that microblog. So when you think of the many facets of benefits that Twitter brings, and then you realize that those benefits were not even taken into consideration in the way that our government emotively reacted to the matter of Twitter following through on its policy to address certain kinds of information that's placed on them, you got to come to the conclusion that the government has violated the rights of citizens. So the argument really is against the government in every sense of the word. The second point on this is that the Nigerian government only discovered that Twitter had failed in some responsibility just because the president's very ill-advised statement against his own citizens in a particular region of the Southeast was considered to be not appropriate. Was it when he discovered that all the sins of Twitter? If that's when he discovered it, then there's something wrong with that. Because you see, the government could very well have strong points, actually, on the fact that there are many times when poor use of social media could create a real situation. There are, hate speeches that are made on Twitter that are totally inappropriate, and government has a duty in that regard. But the way that reasonable governments, democratic governments have played that role has been to, voluntarily engage in a conversation with whether it's Facebook or it's Twitter, in order to contain those kinds of issues. Even at the level of the individual, these groups, these social media platforms do actually give you some rights. I mean, recently, I saw one fake news that was published. Somebody sat down, crafted a whole statement, and put it out as my statement. Ezekwesili says, "Oh, don't mind so and so. It is, everything about bring back our girls,
right?
Was, to bring Jonathan down." And this was not something that I had done. I hadn't said any such thing. It was fake news.
We're going to come back. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Ezekwesili. We're going to come back in a minute and keep chatting with you, but I've got to take a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with a former presidential candidate and former Minister of Education in Nigeria, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniegulu. Now, there are countless women in Nigeria today who deserve recognition for the amazing work they do. One of them is my first guest today, the indomitable and indefatigable fighter for human rights, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. Dr. Ezekwesili is a former vice president of the World Bank Africa region, co-founder and founding director of Transparency International, and co-founder of the Bring Back Our Girls movement. As if that's not enough, she served twice as a federal minister in Nigeria. She is one of many women who are helping to shape the future of this country and are changing socio-political opinions and stereotypes. Outspoken and determined, she's unapologetically stands up for her beliefs and for other people, giving hope and a voice to so many. And Dr. Obi Ezekwesili is still with me. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. And just returning briefly to that nettlesome Twitter question, we understand that the Nigerian government has constituted a team to go into negotiations and discussions with Twitter. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, I welcome it, but I have to tell you that I feel saddened by how we're majoring in the minors as a country. Look at the vast, the myriad of challenges that our country is coping with. And now we elevated a quarrel with Twitter to the topmost of our public agenda. It is too painful. And then you think of the fact that this whole furore that ensued as a result of poor handling of what transpired between the president and Twitter has become a global slur on Nigeria. It was totally avoidable. There was no reason for the poor management of this whole thing. I think that there is something fundamentally wrong in the privatization of the state. I think that the Nigerian state is privatized, and it's wrong. By privatizing the Nigerian state, a matter of an isolated matter that could have been dealt with was turned into a national conflagration.
Let me sort of let me leap in with both feet there, if you don't mind, because the sense then amongst civil society groups is that the physical space where you would normally express your constitutional right to free speech, such as street protests, etc., has been shut down by the government because people have been attacked on the streets during, such protests, and that is why, obviously, they're resorting to the virtual space because the government can't attack people on Twitter physically. So now they want to muzzle Twitter in order to kill those voices. Is that how you see it?
That is a perfect description of what is going on. It's not about how I see it. That's what's going on. And when you say they can't attack people physically, sometimes even the attacks that they haul at people as a government on Twitter. So it's not as though, there is just one side to this whole problem of not creating an environment for healthy debate. The government is an aggressor when it comes to that. But let's hold that and then even think of the fact that we have a public space that has shrunk considerably under this presidency, even though, we had a bit of that. We in the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, we know what we suffered, even during the previous administration. The only thing is that they left a script on the table for this government, and they took it and built on it. Now, is that what should happen? No, it shouldn't be so. And my point to your earlier question is that, look, this idea that we now are setting up this committee made up of ministers holding very important positions in government that are going to sit trying to resolve Twitter is so annoying. It really is annoying, because this is something, the matter of Twitter, engaging Twitter early in the day to say, we suffer from issues of hate speeches. This is a menace. We don't want it because, this is an environment that could be it could be so sensitive enough to create a big problem. We could have done this in a most dignified manner.
I actually take the point that you make there about, I think it certainly raised some eyebrows, the number of ministers who are on that committee who are going to be sitting down to negotiate with Twitter. But at the same time, if you look at the way that these social media organizations, the power that they have, they appear before congressional committees and all kinds of high-level committees all around the world. It underscores the power that they've got and the hold that they've got over society. But let me move away from that a little bit, from Twitter, because there is so much that you're involved with and that we hear you talking about on a daily basis in the newspapers and on sort of in the media. Let's talk a little bit about your call, along with other senior Nigerians, you put out a call to former leaders, presidents, heads of state, National Assembly officers, etc., to save Nigeria from anarchy and civil war. That sounds pretty frightening. Are things on the brink in Nigeria?
I think that the evidences all around us suggest that the center is not holding. And unfortunately, when you look at the center, what you see is an absence of leadership. What you see of the Nigerian state today is that it has lost legitimacy. The confidence of citizens across the country in the Nigerian state has been at a very lowly level, and it ebbs more and more each day that we don't sort of try to get things back to the drawing table. And so to just sit and wait for Godot and just hope that somehow things would correct themselves would be grossly irresponsible on the part of the citizens of this country.
I just want to quickly clarify, sorry to interrupt you again, but I want to quickly clarify a point before we have to take a break. And that is, reading the message from you from that same meeting to, that call you put out to former leaders and so on, you were saying that Nigeria should not hold elections in 2023, or should put aside elections for the moment, preparations for it. Just a quick clarification.
Well, I assume that you're referring to the consultative forum meeting that we had attended. That's the one you're talking about, right?
That's what I'm referring to.
Yes, that's the one okay, very good. So, I think that one of the major issues that we have to admit is that the conditions that we find ourselves in the country really lend themselves to going to the drawing table. I put up a presentation on behalf of the Fix Politics initiative, saying that the Constitution Amendment review process really needs to have a single issue on the table, and that single issue should be an amendment of the 1999 Constitution to allow for a referendum. And
so you'd rather have a referendum about where the country goes next rather than elections. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but we're out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ezekwesili, for talking to us there.